in this clash up and look at this matchup a little bit closer.
Coming out of the Western Clash for us has felt amazing. Before this, we may have felt like we're just a mid-tier NA team, but having results against a European team like Method and having the chance to play versus Dignitas and Fnatic is just amazing, you know? And I look forward to now using that confidence that we've built to show North America and show ourselves that we can be a top team, if not the top team in NA. I think for me, the most exciting part about North America's performance at the Western Clash was that it's going to drive the scene even more so, right? And I think that's going to lead to more exciting games and better gameplay from all of us. Now that the players in North America have seen that they can compete against the best of Europe, now maybe we'll start taking ourselves more seriously as players, as teams, and we'll continue to grow as a region so that we have a good chance at the mid-season brawl. Going against Simplicity this weekend should be interesting. They're a team that is very, very good at being strong when they want to be strong. For me, a player that I want to be looking out for is going to be Zuna. I feel like with that team right now, Zuna is going to try to take control and kind of, you know, become the carry, become the all-star that the team needs. So I look forward to playing against that. I expect things like Tracer to come out of that team. So we'll see what happens.
So when looking at HeroesHearth Esports and even our match last phase, we had a really close set against them. This time, we're going to look to exploit their drafts and hopefully find an edge there. They looked pretty solid at the Western Clash, but where they looked weak was sometimes they seem to have a much weaker draft. So that's where we're going to try to exploit.
McIntyre and Hosty talking a bit there about some of their thoughts and concerns. And one of the biggest things that stood out for me, especially with HeroesHearth being the kind of newer team and one of the representatives now that we had 4 at the Western Clash for North America to show up, is talking about bringing it back to North America and having that evolution, having that growth. And that seems like something that North America, for the most part, has failed to be able to do. But he does, at least with his words there, seem very confident that this is going to be the step to kind of move North America forward. Do you agree?
I think you nailed it when you said the confident part. The confidence thing can sometimes be a big boost no matter what you're doing in life, right? I think now, knowing you've seen it, that you can do it and you've experienced it. And I think for a team like HeroesHearth that also has the experience on their side, plus the new players, it kind of brings a little bit of a different feeling to it, because there's not that, hey, we've been there, done that feeling. It's a matter of like, we're rediscovering ourselves, we're building that confidence. And I think that they were right on the other side when we heard Hosty talk about draft-wise. That's going to be a big talking point for HeroesHearth in the second part of Phase 1. And
for Simplicity, knowing that they have got some of the, struggles here, knowing that Urho is going to be stepping away from the squad and then they need to be getting that replacement. Prismat, the one stepping in, showing up here for the squad. He's going to be on that side lane in that off role. That is now even going to be limiting that draft advantage, I feel like, already for Simplicity. And HeroesHearth has to feel comfortable. But it does look like we are about to get ready to get into our draft here, ladies and gentlemen, for game number 1. Oh, excuse me, the battleground has to be decided first, obviously. We're going to be going to Battlefield of Eternity here, picked by Simplicity. Bans coming out from Simplicity is Brax's Holdout and HeroesHearth Ridding of Cursed Hollow.
Yeah, now Dreadnought, this stands out to me. Battlefield of Eternity obviously is a map where we see a lot of team fights. And you and I have had a lot of discussion on where do we feel the macro is right now. And sometimes it's kind of like, well, there's not much of one in certain circumstances. And we've kind of brought it back to let's fight, right? That's where a lot of people are finding their opportunities. Battlefield of Eternity, probably the best one you can accomplish that on.
Yeah, it's going to be really great to be able to promote that kind of all-in skirmishing play style. And that, that is something that I touch upon a lot at the Eastern and Western clashes, how limited the macro game does seem in this meta. Talking about meta, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, at home we are on the Medivh and Sonya rework patch here, but not coming into some of the nerfs that you see later past that point, so only one patch here since what we saw, again, at both Eastern and Western Clash. For the draft, kicking it off, HeroesHearth is going to take away Malfurion. It's going to cripple that's, Tracer opportunities that you heard McIntyre maybe kind of fearing in their interview beforehand.
I'm going further down the hosty interview, and the map that we saw HeroesHearth, I don't want to say exposed, but maybe draft-wise it had a few stumbling blocks going back to the Gale Force series, was on this battleground, and I think that they're maybe trying to target that. But as you stated just a moment ago, the changes to Medivh and Sonya are definitely being felt here because Medivh's going to be our first pick.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to see that. For anybody keeping track of some of the drafts that we've already seen out of Europe, he has been a very highly prioritized hero. A lot of the changes seem to be focused around, getting the arcane explosion around your force of will and then stacking that with the multiple, kind of AoE shielding with the 13 options and some of those changes. Teams, they really have been utilizing Medivh, and honestly, I'm very satisfied to kind of see him rise to the top. He, for me, has always been that hero that kind of breaks the rules of Heroes of the Storm. Even with his changes, his playmaking capabilities are just almost unparalleled.
There's nothing that stands out to me more than it was almost 2 years ago in June when Medivh came out, and Dreadnought had proclaimed for the longest time, and still does, that he thinks Medivh is broken and wonders why it's not around more. Now that we've got the changes, it's like he's even more terrifying. So we'll see. One thing I want to see where it comes in this draft, Dread, this is also pre-Thrall changes. And this is one of the best battlegrounds to stack that Crash Lightning. And I want to know, will he make it past the second ban, or will he be picked up before?
That's a really good point you bring up. That's something that was a bit more, it kind of made a name for itself. It felt like at the Western Clash, but it didn't really take off until Eastern Clash, especially on maps like Battlefield of Eternity. The Thrall Crash Lightning, the damage and opportunities, because there's so much skirmishing around the mid, which you were talking about before, it just got way too much value, way too much damage, even got, the rare Sundering out of the Eastern Clash. For anybody who knows, a huge fan of that. But I agree with you. That is something that we could expect to see here. If I feel like we see it from anybody, I would assume that to be Simplicity's draft, just because, or early on, because they would like to get that kind of skirmishing and team fighting. It's just Medivh and Thrall have a very interesting relationship on how they function, and it's not like the rework is going to make that much easier. If anything, more difficult, because portals and survivability have been slightly adjusted on the side of Medivh.
Got ourselves a Hanzo and a Garrosh. We saw a lot of Garrosh at Eastern Clash as well. I think that's definitely going to be a hero that steps up in priority. The Hanzo being locked in for Crowan. Crowan, if you were trying to say, hey, we're going to try and target somebody's hero pool, Crowan would have been that one. He played 5 heroes before the Western Clash throughout those first 5 weeks of play. And I think there was some definite question marks when it got past the second ban. If they hadn't locked in that hero, where would that hero come in for Crowan? They get it here before second ban, so I like the priority on that.
I was going to say here for a moment with the hover over the ban, I would like to see Simplicity transition towards that Uther, just because Malfurion already taken away, to not commit to a support on the side of HeroesHearth within their first 3 picks is a rather bold statement. Granted, I think there's a bit of breathing room available just because of that Medivh and the opportunities that provides, but to be able to remove that kind of invulnerability is really going to open up a lot of opportunities for Simplicity, take away what we have kind of come to know as the very highly focused, highly meta supports. And, whenever you have the Genji on your side, you typically want that burst healer, but they actually opt into that Stukov very early. So to me, this screams that they are wanting an extremely offensive, very, opening team fights and skirmishes in levels 1 through 9.
Uther, an obvious pairing with Hanzo throughout our first part here, and also one of the counters towards Genji, because you can get that first lockdown, maybe get that second with Garrosh, so take that off the board, take away that point and click stun. Now for HeroesHearth, they have a lot to consider. Genji Stukov isn't showing much. We know what Stukov has done traditionally. We saw a lot of it at Western Clash. Hello, Shad. But now we're going to see what can Simplicity do with that on their side. And everything that we've seen from K1 Pro thus far, Dread, K1 Pro in terms of supports in North America, #1 in terms of how many percentage of his team's kills he gets. He is a very active support in what he does for this team on the support role. Stukov likes to set up a lot, can initiate in ways that other supports can't. So I think this is a strong pickup when you look at K1 Pro on that side.
But we have to keep in mind that those fights in the earlier stages are very, very relevant. Medivh, Hanzo, he's a little bit slower to start up, but Medivh and Garrosh in particular are very effective into the earlier stages. And Stukov, that threat and the lethality we'd known to come and love from him, isn't until post 13, just to get that snare, the lockdown into the silence. And so not saying that, it is impossible, because K1 has very much proven himself to be a competent support and with that transition, but it is, again, it's going to be one of those, is that worth the risk, the trade-off and reliability of that 13 talent tier fight? 7 seconds out before we see what the next 2 picks for Simplicity are going to be. I assume more offensive stuff to keep with this Genji and that Stukov, that all-in. The Blaze a bit more focused on that macro, but a double reset as the Li Ming is selected.
Li Ming is there. It's been kind of a mixed bag. Hosty and Zuna have played that, but with Genji coming into the mix, I imagine Genji, although we do have something to consider, obviously with the changeover, we might even see Zuna move over to that melee role. It's something he's played before. Again, no Thrall up until this point. So old Zuna was more than okay with running Thrall, so we'll see if that comes in. But with Blaze there, Blaze generally has moved into that secondary frontliner role, not necessarily into the main tank. So if Thrall's going to be seen, I think it would be on the side of HeroesHearth.
Yeah, and you know, normally you'd be looking at the Malthael ban and be like, obviously you're going to see the Blaze kind of show up, but Blaze, you know, the side lane pressure and the relevance of that and the macro that we were talking about has died out quite heavily to where I do wonder if that's going to gain that much value. Again, the Malthael, you'd be like, oh, it's going to be incentivized, but it's also the Malthael ban coming out just purely deterring the Garrosh counter, not wanting to deal with the threat and the percentage damage to be able to ignore that, you know, armor that he's able to stack up with his passive. 2 seconds left for HeroesHearth. They're going to commit to a Sonya and a Lily. Man, I thought we were going to get a bit wild, but not this wild, J-Hal. Are you ready for adventure? That's about the only thing you can ask whenever that little panda gets selected.
But here's the thing, is like I'm trying to figure out
why.
Why?
Okay. Normally you'd be like, well, it's because of the auto attackers, J-How, and then you go, but
There's
who's
Li Ming and
auto
Genji.
attacking? Yeah, who is going to be looking to get that? Both of the resets are spell oriented. You know, she does provide a lot of sustained healing compared to some of the other supports. I mean, since the changes have come in, generally speaking, she's only gotten better and better, and even, you know, way back, she wasn't necessarily a laughable support for how commonly she was picked, or more so uncommonly.
This is going to sound a little weird. Jugs, I think, is a strong heroic in terms of what it could potentially do. The problem with Jugs is they can be interrupted. And you've got Stukov on the other side. If he goes the extra range on his lurking arm, you just like, all right, look, all I need to do is get this to proc once onto the Lily, and Jugs is completely canceled out by a basic ability.
I would argue, you know, I agree with you that it is very concerning. You know, Jug's capability, Tyrael is going to be the last lock-in, the main warrior here for Simplicity. You know, very, you know, all in. Once the team fight starts, there's going to be fireworks with Simplicity's draft here. But, you know, bringing it back to the Sonya Lily that we got here. The Lily value, one of the biggest downsides to having Lily originally, she's had a couple of changes to be able to better deal with burst, but burst has always been that one thing where it goes, not her specifically, because she's pretty mobile compared to some of the other supports. She's pretty effective at surviving on her own. It's keeping those other targets alive. Having a Medivh will be one of those things that they can rely on to kind of make that happen. Also, if we do see the AoE shielding come in, for anybody who doesn't know, Jugs in order trickles into HP from lowest to highest. So then, you know, again, that lack of burst, if you get the AoE shielding, then you reliably can ensure that everybody kind of survives. It's pretty much like a single target amplified tranquility. But again, it is interruptible, which is one of the moments where you go, is this going to be worth it? But there's not that many interrupts. There is the silence, there is the Blaze jet propulsion, but other than that, things get a little bit hairy.
This is just an interesting draft. Arthalon, obviously, I think will be the Medivh player. He's kind of been that flex player that we've seen on their team for quite some time, going back to the Open Division days. Has some Medivh experience, and it's never about individual Medivh play, Dreadnought. It's always about team play around the Medivh, and that's always kind of been the biggest factor for me. Maybe HeroesHearth has been practicing something in their downtime where they like, what if we went Medivh and Lily? And something in scrims is like just kind of clicking and triggering, and you're like, let's go. Game one, right out of the gate, like we're hitting it BOE.
They're swinging, and you know what? We are ready to kick off game number one. Keep you guys at home waiting no more. HGC North America is going to start now, and it's on Battlefield of Eternity. In the blue is that Simplicity. We're going to have Hosty here. K1 Pro, obviously repping the support, going to be on Stukov. King Caffeine on that Tyrael. Zuna, I believe we have on the Genji, and Prismat and the side lane there playing Blaze.
On the right side here for HeroesHearth, we will have Ishbu on the Garrosh, Arthalon on Medivh, BBJ taking us all on an adventure there on Lily, Crowan on Hanzo, and McIntyre, of course, in that melee role on Sonya.
Level 1 for Lily is going to be Eager Adventurer. Interesting choice, helping with that mobility I was talking about, increasing the fast feet duration, that passive that she gets whenever she receives damage. She's probably one of the best laners, kind of skirmishers, actually. A lot of people don't know that about Lily. She can 1v1 pretty good, much like Brightwing, but even better so, just because she can get that self-sustain on her own, but her skirmishing and her trade so effective. Talking about some skirmishing and trades, we got a little bit of that here with the 4 versus 4 on bottom. Nice silence coming out from K1 Pro. Reset here for Hosty, as he's going to go make HeroesHearth eat a big orb. That's first blood.
No force of will when you're silenced there. K1 Pro making his presence felt here very very early on. And Simplicity, if you're on the side of Simplicity, you know, the results weren't necessarily there, Dreadnought, in the first part here of Phase 1, but they weren't far off. And it seems like they were always competitive, always trying to find a way. They weren't able to find it. Getting this type of start into Phase 2, they're a very momentum-based team. That's what we heard from basically every other team playing against them. I think if they're going to get momentum going in, this Game 1 is very important to them.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. And, you know, these players in the past, even with some of the struggles that the quote-unquote old gods have kind of had, depending on what era you look at their careers, they all have gotten, I feel like, a lot of respect still, even during kind of the lower moments of just being those teams. They're always on a team that can take a game at any point, and that we've seen Simplicity display that in Phase 1, Part 1 as well. Something HeroesHearth is going to be looking to stopping. And right now, Simplicity, they're doing everything right here, keeping up quite consistent pressure onto the bottom half of the map, setting themselves up for a few kills. I mean, by no means is this, you know, game over, holy cow, huge advantages. But on Battlefield, in the laning phase before the first Immortal, it's very rare that you see this kind of, you know, proactiveness, especially out of North America.
We're going to see HeroesHearth defending here, but as we take a look at the top, we can see Simplicity after they obtain the bottom camp. Now they're looking at the top. Prismaticism and Zuna trying to hold up Arthalon and McIntyre here, but the boys are back in town as Simplicity's like, look, we're rotating up a few more here. It's Arthalon forced to retreat.
Prismat, though, maybe out too far. He's going to get flipped and knocked up. Great job there. BBJ coming in with the heals, going to throw out the blind, but the damage over the wall and the jet propulsion. Silence is used to deter everybody away.
Oh,
and
you got
K1 Pro saves the day, denying the entrance there off that portal. We wondered, or at least I wondered, why is this Stukov getting picked that high up with the Malfurion priority? I think we just found the answer. When you lock in first pick Medivh, we are going to make sure there is a big silence at the end of that entrance.
Everybody's stuck in that silence, and it's like, HeroesHearth goes in, they're like, you got this? Because I need to get out. No, you got this. I got to get out. No, you got to get this. I got to get it. And everybody's like, wait, nobody got that. And Blaze walks away. Like,
that was such a brilliant play here from Simplicity. Battlefield, or excuse me, the Immortals now. Number 1 going to be spawning. HeroesHearth did spend some time here off to the side to make sure that they get their Shaman, and it can be well-timed after Simplicity got theirs a bit earlier. With the double camp pressure, this is a minor advantage for Simplicity, and the double reset composition is going to be wanting to look to get aggressive during this time frame. Sonya, we're doing her best to clear the Shamans, again, up above here for HeroesHearth. But this is a pretty big victory for Simplicity. It's these small advantages that they're going to stack one on top of another with each other. And if they get this first Immortal, that this composition becomes very terrifying. Because the, you know, trade-off of double reset oftentimes is very little anti-siege, very little clear. And, you know, if you never lose the Immortal, you don't really have to consider that.
That's kind of like if you don't need a healer if they're all dead, right, Dredd?
Exactly.
Exactly the same thing, but here's Ishbu. Speaking of dead, he's getting near death, but that is Garrosh as his armor stacks up. King Caffeine met with a little bit in return. Zuna going in deep here, trying to get aggressive there on Genji as he moves his way out. HeroesHearth takes the portal. They're going to retreat to safety, but they're going to give up this Immortal damage, Dredd.
It's going to give them at least the 50% loss here. Now it is upon them really to kind of, you know, further the, you know, I guess, really fight back, I guess, essentially is what I'm looking for when it comes to the second Immortal phase. They need to get very aggressive and zone off, specifically focusing on getting that Immortal stun. We've seen the spin go down. Everybody from Simplicity identifying the necessity of this aggression, going to back out for a moment. Prismat flanking from above. Silence goes down. Jet propulsion lands onto one. Zuna goes in, though. Ishbu is the focus. He flips out. Nice hit onto the stun. McIntyre, though, go ahead and find himself a Zuna. It's a nice trade. Meanwhile, though, Simplicity getting all that damage onto the Immortal. Not enough to get it. 313 HP remain, but it's only a matter of time. There it is. First Immortal, 50%, maybe, you know, plus some.
And that worked out really well for Simplicity. If you're on the side of HeroesHearth, maybe it's not too bad, because once you get level 7 with Hanzo going into the scatter arrow build, then obviously it comes a little bit easier for that poke at post level 7 when you get that cooldown reduction with your auto attacks to get that scattering arrow off a little bit quicker. And obviously stacking that up, he's 10 out of 20 stacks on his level 1, so we'll see if Krohn can get that. But in the meantime, they do have that Immortal here to defend as it's pushing in the top lane.
How much are they going to make happen with it here? 7 talent tiers now been achieved, the 4 versus 4. The double reset's going to just look for somebody to get out of position, look to get the all-in trade, and make the force of will, you know, look a little bit more sloppy there. Zuna goes in, not going to have anybody to follow, gets a nice trade here onto Arthalon. Focus onto the fort is still here. It's inevitably going to go down. HeroesHearth, how much respect to the gap closers do they give? The answer is not much, and the punishment is there. They immediately get the initiation, but the Lily blind and heals is enough. BBJ there on that little panda is able to keep up Crowing.
Is it enough, though? That's going to be the question as we move forward, is keeping somebody alive versus being aggressive with maybe a different support. We'll see how aggressive they get. Again, post-level 10 does get a lot easier for Lili, I think. You know, the one thing to also consider is Lili's cleanse is a little bit different than most other cleanses in the game in that it's 40 seconds. And then having that, you get cooldown on it affected by your fast feet. So we'll see how that comes into play. But in the meantime, Simplicity continuing to exude dominance here over HeroesHearth. They're just taking down as many structures as they can.
One talent that I am keeping my eyes on in this game is going to be once we get to that 13 threshold, what do we see on Tyrael? Western Clash, we saw the, kind of holy ground being, I'm going to say, an option, whereas the Eastern Clash, it very much felt like that was not the case. Near 100% pick rate there. Personally, I feel like whenever Tyrael is a large majority of your initiation, yes, the jet propulsion's there, but having that kind of zone control on a map like Battlefield of Eternity, I'd really like to see Simplicity transition into that. It's also going to enable a lot with the play around the portals, right? Because we don't have the double 13 stacking in the same manner where you can see the double portal back-to-back with that 1 second downtime. It's going to make it to where Holy Ground's effectiveness into the Medivh matchup, I don't want to say it's better, but it's definitely more, the Medivh has to second-guess his portals a little bit more whenever that talent's picked up.
I agree with you on that in the sense that the 13 play is going to be particularly interesting, mostly around that Tyrael. It's a little bit different, I think, when it comes to Battlefield of Eternity because it's a bit more open, but in terms of the initiation, I 100% agree with you in the sense that they have the lurking arm, they've got the jet propulsion that can combo off that, and if you can kind of get all that accumulating back to back to back, then it makes it a lot easier, I think, to get those engages.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. It's like a wild noise appears here, but so far so good here for Simplicity, as I think we've already got this game ready, back and up and ready here for you guys. They're rounding not only the second Immortal opportunity, but a pretty big advantage. I don't want to say a colossal one, but a pretty significant one. Jet propulsion, use Arthlon. It's going to get kind of tossed around there. Nice portal out. It's going to save Garrosh here. But, I mean, it's a big enough window to where this is a lot of free damage onto the Immortal, something that HeroesHearth, I'd normally say they need to look to capitalize on, but with losing that trade, it very much is going to be out of, the list of options remaining for them for the next few minutes.
Well, with level 10 Simplicity being very aggressive in their calls, they're going to take the Shaman camp away from HeroesHearth. The HeroesHearth, Dread, update on those stats. Baseline, obviously, is that Master's Touch. 29 out of 40. 12 stacks for Crowan's level 1, so still doesn't have that extra scattering arrow at level 1.
It's an interesting choice to see Simplicity, use their 10 advantages to get the invade onto the Shaman. Hold up, though. Prismat's getting flipped over and immediately knocked up. Jet Propulsion used to get out. Stukov with a nice lurking arm to kind of further the advance. Ishbu, though, taking a bit of damage here. The trade is going to be advantageous for Simplicity. No heroics use, at least not yet, as we start off this second half of this Immortal.
Second half is all about poke here, Dread, because you've got Hanzo on one side, you've got Li Ming on the other. Who can you protect the most and who can you get the most out of? And I think that with, obviously, Hanzo, a little bit different flavor, a little bit easier for him to land those shots. You can see him getting some value out of this build finally, but it's going to be a matter of where will Simplicity pull the trigger, because undoubtedly so, they will do it. You could actually see Prismat at the top of your screen being scouted out by Arthalon, unable to get the initiation, but Simplicity moves forward.
And it should be noted that Polybomb pickup for Arthalon is going to be a huge deterrent towards the Sanctification. King Caffeine has to second guess when they go in for that all-in, which is, I mean, essentially inevitable when you're looking at a double reset composition. Arthalon falling low, there's Force of Will 1. Every time that Force of Will gets used, expect Simplicity to try and capitalize. Bit of damage there onto Ishbu, but he's got the armor, he's okay. Move up for the poke.
Li Ming coming in as well as Tyrael, getting the poke, getting the feigned aggression here as Ishbu continuing to stay around that 50% mark. McIntyre looking for some initiation on the back line, unable to get much behind that. Arthalon also continuing to try and hit that Master's Touch, get that stacked up, but we've got Zuna in deep.
Portal is going to be laid down. Nobody goes too far. There goes McIntyre on the back line. Pops Wrath of the Berserker, misses the Ancient Spear, and nopes out. Genji goes in. That is the Polybomb used. Zenyatta actually going to trigger onto somebody else as well. Hosi ends up eating that, but now Sanctification is very much a real threat. King Caffeine moves forward, drops the Sanctification. He's the only man there. Huge Dragon Arrow plus the Immortal knockback. Almost gets the kill. K1 Pro flailing swipes everybody away into the bunker, out from the bunker. Simplicity is on full retreat.
He's on retreat, and we see Ishbu not able to get much follow-up there, but K1 Pro got out just barely there as he was able to dodge that last scattering arrow but now that opens the door for HeroesHearth to move in a little bit. Jug still 30 seconds away, one of the shorter cooldowns. Nice Indomitable, that self-cleanse by Ishbu. Portal out from Arthlon.
Simplicity now using the window after this tap to move up. They need to find a way to rid of the rest of this Immortal HP. 3 versus 5. Stukov arm set down, and that looks like it will seal the deal. About 35 to 40% shielding on this Immortal. HeroesHearth stepping up. They want to get the fight. They drop the portal. Prismat with a great jet propulsion. Locks down 2. He's going to use the bunker a little bit early here, maybe out of position. Bazuna, Swift Strike is available.
Simplicity getting out of there alive and pretty much unscathed as HeroesHearth, unable to really get the aggression that they want. Now they face another Immortal pushing down. This time it'll be the bottom lane as they move back here. Simplicity starting to aggress forward, and I don't know how much they'll be able to hold here until they need to fall back.
Last fort we saw HeroesHearth very much fail to respect the gap closing capabilities over this choke. This time it is a different case. Everyone kind of retreating before that fort even falls below 50%. I was going to say, if we see them make that mistake again, I would expect Simplicity to be a bit more profitable than the last time we saw them make that move. But talking about profits, they're seeing a lot of it here. Simplicity, as they are now going to take on this keep from wall shielding, already removed on the Immortal, but it is very likely that they kiss this 13 talents here before HeroesHearth has anything to say about it.
Immortal goes down, but not before taking that last turret with it, as 13 was indeed picked up off of that push there for Simplicity. They have themselves a full level lead. Both forts down now on the side of HeroesHearth. Simplicity, 1 kill is all they've obtained this game, but it's been enough since the early part of this game to keep control. The standoffs have worked out in their favor. HeroesHearth still searching for a way to execute with this comp.
This is one of those situations, though, where generally speaking, teams with at least weaker macro kind of fall apart. At least struggle to keep their advantage, and that's something that I want to keep my eye on here for Simplicity. Just because when there is no clear major objective on Battlefield, we know the Immortals are all the game is kind of about, other than a few rare off-time Shaman camps, for instance that of HeroesHearth, that try and help make up for their disadvantage. There isn't very good and clear answers on how to keep this advantage. So what are they going to do with this window? Where do they show that aggression, or do they in fact again allow HeroesHearth to control the map temporarily until the 13 is achieved? And it looks like HeroesHearth is the one, again, on the better half of that coin.
Yeah, they got both the camps, and it was really not so much about trying to push down a lane aggressively. It was just trying to close that gap of the 13, which they've seemingly done so. A few more minions will obtain that. Sonya and Genji were skirmishing down in the bottom part of the map, but we're 20 seconds away from our next Immortal Shaman camp. Is available, however, for Simplicity.
Simplicity did end up moving into the Holy Ground at 13. Also, we do see Stukov picking up the talent that really kind of, sets him apart from the rest here with a virulent reaction. It's going to allow that snare. Ishbu gets the invade with the portal set up. No sanctification yet. Zuna falling very low. Gets the Ancient Spear, but ends up getting a deflect and survives as he drops the tap over the wall. Tonk goes down, but the bunker.
Oh, Arthlon just barely survived as we saw Hosty get on that backside on Medivh there. Forced to retreat as much as they can. HeroesHearth on the back foot right now.
And on the back foot at a, kind of not optimal timing for them, as this Immortal is going to eat a lot of free damage during this time frame. Arthlon had to make a full back, so he's going to be flying himself over here into the Raven form. In the meanwhile, here's Hearth. They identify everybody's getting the damage onto the Immortal, try and get some for themselves. Hanzo doing his best to even the score. Prismat gets flipped over, drops the passive, but too much damage there. I say that, but he actually keeps himself alive with the shielding, the silence from Stukov, and Sonya, she is not long for this world. Genji gonna go and hack and slash, looking for reset number 2 onto Ishbu. Not gonna commit. Nice force of will, and the armor enough to keep him up.
Now Simplicity will turn their attention back to the Immortal, as it will be down to 50% here. And that Shaman camp that they had obtained is still pushing that bot lane, so that has to be responded to immediately before they can defend here, as we'll see Simplicity get some early poke in while they see that Crowan was down there on that bottom lane. Now we'll see HeroesHearth move back in for a team fight. You can also see Prismat moving to the top on the mini-map, trying to get a little bit of soak in, trying to get 16. If this becomes a stall, they will inevitably get 16 and then look to be aggressive then. See if HeroesHearth can kind of be a little bit more timely, get there before 16 is obtained on the side of Simplicity.
Looking to recollect themselves. Crowan throwing scattering arrow here and there wherever he can find one. Knock up onto Prismat. Ishbu unable to find himself to toss in. Keep your eye always on Arthlon there, on that Raven form, hovering above the rest of the squad.
They go looking for the engagement. Ishbu and team still unable to close that gap. They're playing around the Medivh, but they're also trying to find a different way with Ishbu moving in. And I think that as this team starts to get a little bit more synergy around that, they'll find the engagement. But you can see Ishbu's on one end and the rest of the team is on the other. They're just waiting to follow up, but Ishbu has not been able to find it. There's the toss, the taunt. They get the stun and the polymorph. And that's going to be Zuna going down instantly. Jugs are out here for BBJ, and that might have been just what Heroes Hearth needed.
Yeah, great job there as well with the polybomb, getting the interrupt onto the Sanctification, not able to keep his team alive. King Caffeine and friends now in a 5 versus 4. Still have Heroics if they feel like they can take the skirmish, but Heroes Hearth is going to start this Immortal, getting it now below 50%. They go back in. Tyrael's in a bad spot, gets flipped over. Going to go into the bunker. Looks like he'll keep himself alive. Arthlon, though, coming out from that portal. The knock-up onto 2. Nobody's committing to cap here. Sanctification just came back off cooldown once again after a second interrupt. And look at that lurking arm damage, the silence. So crippling here from Simplicity, but nobody's getting a kill. Just a lot of damage and trading here, J-How.
A lot of trading. You can see the Force of Will, the AoE Force of Will, getting a lot of value in these team fights, healing up, keeping people alive. You can see Hosty on the top left side pushing out the damage towards Heroes Hearth, but it's not before Heroes Hearth gets that in the... Oh! The Wave of Force almost gets it, but the Force of Will was still there. And Arthlon makes it out alive.
Another Immortal over, but this time it is in favor of Heroes Hearth. 50% shielding, but with that 16 being so close for Simplicity, I'm interested in the fact that everybody's showing this interest towards top, because it's very likely 16 gets hit by Simplicity, they ignore this Immortal, and they force the fight 16 into 15, rather than that bottom fort, which would have been a free kind of transition. Dragon Arrow goes out, trying to force the fight pre-16, unable to do so with the double bunker juke. No Groundbreaker going to connect here. 16 still yet to be achieved for Simplicity. If Heroes Hearth wants a fight, it's going to be as this fort goes down. They portal out, showing defensive. Jet Propulsion going to lock in 1. Passive used. Prismat second guessing maybe the initiation there. 16's still yet to be achieved for either side.
Zuna. Zuna?
Zuna is dead. Very good punishment there from Heroes Hearth.
He got away with a lot of that, but this is post level 10 when we've got a taunt, and it kind of reminds me of
Rich?
Rich, yeah. Rich, we saw a lot of that, especially into a garage. Post level 10, that's almost impossible to do, Dreadnought.
Yeah, it's a very, very fast animation there for the garage to be able to get that off. It's not even like you have to hit the crowd control like some of the other heroes. You legitimately just go, here's my, spam my R, somebody's near me, we're going to get the kill. And that punishment is something that Simplicity has to be able to tone back. Something we saw from Zuna and friends. Wow, nice portal arcane explosion attempt there from Heroes Hearth. Part of the reason we've seen this build really take off for Medivh post rework. The AoE damage is just, not only do you have the survivability where the trade seems a bit too unreasonable, but then you have that damage explosion from each and every shield on your team. But that, you know, kind of about that playmaking. We heard McIntyre talk about, I think Zuna is going to be the player looking to step up for this team, looking to put this game into his control. And, you know, I very much think that that is something we've seen from Zuna time and time again. It's a very reasonable thing to expect from him. And it's that kind of plays where if you can properly punish and not allow him to go for, you know, a risky trade where he's trying to get that initiation, you can oftentimes, you know, make it look a little funky. Something that Simplicity's got to clean up. But I also want to highlight, I think Zuna's done an amazing job for the first steps of this game on applying pressure onto Arthlon. For putting a Force of Will onto just a Medivh by himself in a 1v1 is definitely not optimal and cripples any teamfight capabilities. Here's one, here's a team fight.
Here's a team fight as they get the knock up, the stun, and that's going to be K1 Pro going down, followed by King Caffeine, as that is both Stukov and Tyrael that have fallen. They still have the camp pushing in here on the top. That will buy them precious time to move right over. And with Hanzo, look for this health bar on this Immortal to fall rapidly. And given the speed that Hanzo can take this and the death timers on the side of Simplicity, we are going to be looking at a heavily shielded Immortal for Heroes Hearth.
Yeah, it's very, very likely that we find it with at least some, you know, 80%, depending on how much damage Li Ming is able to get out over this downtime. And with her positioning right now, the answer is going to be not very much. I don't even think it's likely to get that. So nearing 100% shielding. Very impressive performance over that initiation from Heroes Hearth. And it is now going to achieve, I mean, when you look at a, 20-minute Immortal at this stage of the game, you're going, this is keep. The question is it game? And Simplicity, they've been initiated on so effectively the last 2 skirmishes. I expect Heroes Hearth to look at this keep, dive right past it, get themselves a kill, and then be like, thank you for game number 1.
It seems likely. They do have Li Ming and Genji on the side of Simplicity. You have the Mirror Ball at 16. Great poke. Genji did go the Shuriken build at level 4, so his Shurikens do quite a bit more damage. So we'll see if they can hold off as this Immortal pushing down the bottom lane of Simplicity.
Turret 1 removed. Sidewall is the biggest thing to keep track of there. Lurking Arm going to be dropped from K1 Pro. Not available for a few more. Flip over. Prismat uses the bunker. Immortal Stun deters the advance of Simplicity. The taunt immediately after. Dragon Arrow and Blaze. That fire is put out quick. Now, HeroesHearth taking out the portal. Move in a little bit farther. Genji with the Dragon Blade on the backside, but the Jugs keeping everybody alive here, J-How.
The Jugs are the answer to the Dragon Blade. That is confirmed for all your Hero League games going forward. And what is confirmed is that keep going down. McIntyre going in as the rest of HeroesHearth looking for another kill, trying to close this out.
King Caffeine ends up keeping himself alive. Scattering Arrow not able to connect, but all the members of HeroesHearth wailing away at the core. Shielding on the Immortal is gone, but it is irrelevant as that core is quick to drop. Game number 1 is going over to HeroesHearth.
Wow. Now that was an adventure.
That was, in fact, an adventure. You know, we saw the Lili. We talked about maybe some of the pros and cons, what we might think we would see from it, and I do feel like a lot of that was out of the force of will. Plus, having the Lili, it really removes a lot of the downside, you know, coming out from them. Also, just HeroesHearth in their initiations. What a great way to understand how to come back, especially with that fight on top, the Dragon Arrow. I mean, all it started with was Zuna trying to make one play, the taunt, and just they were like, nah, not happening.
The one thing about HeroesHearth is they're all about combos. Everything about combos, like 1, 2, 3 steps. Sometimes they'll go 4, 5, 6 steps, and it's like, wait, that seems like a little difficult to pull off. But when it comes to HeroesHearth, they're always in sync with each other. That is their best attribute as a team, is to find that synergy, find those combos together. And whether it was the taunt into the polymorph, things like that, you had mentioned it as well. One of the deterrents towards Holy Ground. We also saw it used there against Blaze, or not Holy Ground, but Sanctification. The bunker, you can't cast that when you're taunted and then polymorphed, and the amount of blow-up damage that they had in there, especially the stun from the Dragon Arrow, I mean, it's like one shot, one kill. What's the deal, you know? And at that point, you get one pick, and the game opens wide open for you.
It's one of those situations where now we immediately got to be asking, what is going to happen in the draft? Does the Medivh have to be something that is focused in terms of priority in the ban? Also, we have to highlight the fact that there was I don't want to say it was risky because it was obviously well thought out with the intent of, I believe, the Medivh into the high Stukov on the side of Simplicity. Maybe, you know, go with something a bit more traditional, especially with, you know, Genji going into Dragonblade, not having a burst healer with them. That puts a lot of dependence on the Tyrael Sanctification. But how many Sanctifications actually gain value? One actually went down and gained any value is only when he was split by himself with that initiation. And I don't put that onto King Caffeine and competence on Tyrael as much as I do Arthlon having the Polybomb and having those tools constantly making Simplicity go, you know, our one-shot double reset composition is really having a hard time with a Medivh who stops the Sanct and a Force of Will that's going to stop our momentum and, more importantly, those resets.
The Force of Will 7-13 combo right now, it's pretty strong. You know, HeroesHearth is willing to first pick him. I imagine that if he's not banned out, whoever's got first pick will likely have that in their sights. If we look on the other side of Simplicity, Hosty's kind of been that main carry role this season, but looking back last year, played a lot of Medivh, a lot of Tassadar, things like that. So very competent on that hero himself. I think that will be a highly contested hero when we move into game 2.
And if you guys